All right. Hi, and welcome to From Many People's Strength, the podcast that covers Saskatchewan politics and current events. My name is Cory, and my pronouns are he and him.
And my name is David. My pronouns are they and them, and I'm okay with he and him as well.
And it's been a while.
Yeah, long time no see. Completely uneventful.
Yeah, that's right. We recorded an episode 2 months ago, but never published it because I got busy covering extra shifts at work, and it's been nonstop covering of extra shifts for the entire time. So,
well, and it seemed like every single week during the hiatus, there was some news story that both of us were like, oh, I wish we could cover this. And then we come back and things have actually quieted down a little bit over the last couple of weeks. So it's a matter of either going back and covering things from a month ago or just picking up where we left off, or picking up from where we are and moving forward, and maybe having a slightly less ground shaking things to go over, but still,
which is I think we'll still cover a couple of the things that happened in the last couple months. But I guess we can just get right into it.
Yeah.
The Saskatchewan government is under fire for funding independent schools run by anti-LGBTQ churches. This was posted at the end of June, June 23rd. So about almost 4 weeks ago now. But yeah, so there's in the article, they say last month, the province formally announced the 21 independent and 4 historic, quote unquote, historical schools in Saskatchewan that will receive $17.5 million in operating grants for the 2022 and 2023 school year. As per the latest provincial budget, that includes $2.6 million towards a new certified independent school category. And the province says the schools that will fall under the new category are still to be determined. In the article, Dustin Duncan talks about having more choice in education. And I find that to be kind of a red flag, I guess. I'm not a fan of the school choice idea, because that often means that public schools are underfunded. But
yeah, absolutely. Like, that is 100% what it means. It siphons money out of the public system. Like, that is what it is intended to do. Like, that is not an unfortunate side effect. That is very much part of its intent. It is designed around undermining public education, and it is a very much a backdoor to privatizing education. That's its own issue above and beyond any of the religious aspects. Both are incredibly troubling and problematic.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we're both non-believers. I have a hard enough time with funding religious schools, let alone schools that are discriminatory against LGBTQIA students and whatnot, like family members and such. Like, it's I don't know. It's really bad when our provincial leaders think that, like, that's okay, like, because they want to promote what they call, like, freedom of religion, right? It's the same thing as they have going on down in the States. But,
and, like, again, I go back to even if there was a purely 100% secular private school that was siphoning money out of the public system, I would still object to it. Like, that would still be a problem. The fact that, I think there are inherent issues with private schools to begin with. I think, as soon as you start creating separate education systems for the rich, you're running into a factor where this is just about reinforcing social stratification and a divide between rich and poor and a variety of different social divides. So that is a problem in and of itself. But when you add in the religious aspect as well, it becomes even more problematic. And like one of the things that comes up in this article, this idea that Westgate Heights Academy is owned and run by Westgate Alliance Church. The church put out a discipline and restoration policy that explicitly states homosexuality is in violation of scriptural moral standards and is the equivalent to such crimes as fraud and sexual assault.
Jesus, like what
so their defense essentially is they come back and say, oh, well, that doesn't apply to the school, that's only for the church itself. So no, right, like right. It'd be like me saying, I have a rule for my entire house. Every single part of my house says X is a rule. Why would you think my son's bedroom is affected by that? Like it's like the school is owned by the church. It is run by the church. It has discriminatory hiring practices that allow for it to hire based on the church. Like all of these things say it is part of the church. And to suggest that, oh, well, this policy doesn't really apply to the school is nonsense.
Yeah, for sure.
Like everyone knows that it applies to the school.
So I think it's well established, right? Like that, and well known by many people in the province that by doing this, the province is funding discrimination. So that's where we're at. Like our public money is going to fund discriminatory practices in schools.
It is one of these things where it is incredibly frustrating because it's not like this isn't known. It's not like, haha, this was revealed and now there can be something done about it. It's the government knows what's happening. They intend to have it happen. And many of the people in this province support it. So it is incredibly frustrating. Again, it's one of those weird stories where I don't know what more can be said, because at this point, at some point, the people who vote for the Sask Party but don't want to be called homophobes and bigots need to have a good hard look in the mirror and say, which of these things is more important to me?
Yeah.
Like, what is more important? My identity as someone who votes for the Sask Party, or my belief that I am not a bigot? Because at some point you have to acknowledge those two things cannot coexist. I don't know how much more blatant it can be when you have support for public taxpayer money going to teaching children that being gay is the same as sexually assaulting someone.
So Councillor Shaw, she talked about how some people are homeless. They don't want to be in homes. It was very
well, and she specifically said there are Indigenous people out there who choose to be homeless and want to.
Right. Yeah, it was a very messed up comment. You can go to CTV News link we'll provide in the show notes to see it. But in this one on June 30th, Regina's mayor Sandra Masters apologized for the comments the councillor made on Indigenous culture and homelessness.
Yeah. It's important to note, Shaw herself did not apologize. Like, no. The article headlines seem to make it, on some of the stories around this, seem to make it sound like Shaw herself apologized, which is not what happened. The mayor apologized, and not even on Shaw's behalf, but like the mayor
as a person,
as a human being, being like, to summarize, I am so sorry we have this wackadoodle on our city council. She did not say that. She was far more politically astute than I am.
Yeah.
This is on brand for Shaw, though. This is very much on brand for Trina Shaw. She's not stupid. Wild. She knows what she's doing. These are not accidental slip-ups. No. She means what she says when she believes that Indigenous people who are suffering because of their own choices and their own failure of character. And
Right.
she believes that, when it comes to recognition of pride within schools, that this is akin to bestiality or whatever she compared it to, or when looking at banning conversion therapy. Again, she believes what she is saying out loud and implying and inferring. These are not accidental things that are misspoken. They are intentional statements made during council meetings, made during prepared statements, posted on social media, written out, like thought through, posted. These are not accidental slips of the tongue. And that's what this was. It was not an accident. It was she legitimately, honestly believes that Indigenous people who are homeless or going through a rough time or are suffering from marginalization are doing so because of their own failings,
right?
Or their own moral failings. And she'll backpedal and say she's taken out of context, or say, "Oh, that's not really what I meant," or "This was a gotcha." But none of these are gotcha questions. Like, these aren't her coming out of nowhere.
No, that's right.
And the apologies, when she does apologize, are always couched in weasel words. They never really apologies. And this time she hasn't even attempted to make an apology.
No, she did say that she felt that, she said that she felt she was misrepresented, but I don't see how one can misrepresent what she says outright.
Yeah.
But
she goes by the just asking questions defense, right? Right. I'm not saying these things. I'm just asking questions.
As though none of us were on the internet in 2016. We've all seen this before. Yeah. You're jacking off. We get it, but it's still bullshit. I mean, I don't have any inside knowledge or anything about what she's going to do, but I could see this plays to a certain base within the Saskatchewan political world. So I could see her moving into a provincial politics, even if, this doesn't actually make her, she doesn't win council seat again or something. Like, I could see it moving into moving into the provincial sphere.
Yeah. And that's been I would not be shocked by that in the slightest. And she's making a name for herself in the circles who want to hear these just asking questions, right?
She's the Marjorie Taylor Greene of Saskatchewan.
and to be fair, up here, you do have to be slightly more subtle than Marjorie Taylor Greene can be.
Yes.
So she's couching it a lot more, but
yeah. But she's saying
we'll see where it goes as she gets more emboldened, right?
Yeah, that's right. Much of the same stuff. She was the counter voice on the conversion therapy debate. She was the on the wrong side of pride events. She's on the wrong side of homelessness. She's on the wrong side of all of these issues. So she's the wrong side of masks. The wrong side of
vaccines. It's been
yeah.
We'll see where that goes. But again, the nice thing is, if we're going to focus on a positive, she's more and more becoming isolated on the council. We do have a council that, for the most part, she sticks out because she's not just one of 5 who's talking this way. She's more and more becoming the devil's advocate on council, which, again, I think you and I both have opinions about people who feel the need to always be devil's advocate. But the nice part is, it does tend to look like she's in opposition to the more stable, I don't know what the term I want to use is. I don't want to say left-wing part of council, because they're more left-wing than most political bodies, but they're still largely a centrist group.
Yeah, they're slightly more progressive than.
They're a left of center. They're if city councils had political parties, it would probably be a relatively right wing NDP or a left wing Liberal, right? Like that's sort of where they would be. We're not dealing with the Socialist Party of Saskatchewan or anything. But
nope.
To your chagrin.
Much to my chagrin, exactly. I wasn't going to say it.
No, it's all good. It's all good. So,
yeah.
Speaking of the right wing of the NDP.
Yes. Carla Beck wins the Sask NDP leadership to be the first woman to be elected leader. I don't know how big of a statement that is. Both candidates were women. I don't know.
Yeah.
Were there other candidates yet at any point?
I only had known of the two. And I shouldn't say the right wing of the NDP. I was being a little facetious. The centrist wing of the NDP. I like Beck. I think I like her more than I've liked most of the other leaders we've had in the last. I like her more than I've liked any of the leaders we've had in the last decade and a half.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I don't dislike. Right.
Yeah.
I don't dislike Carla Beck. I am happy to see a woman leading a political party in Saskatchewan. It's not like that's super common here. Of the two, I think I would have chosen the other candidate, whose name is escaping me at the moment.
Harvey? Yeah.
Harvey.
I'm trying to remember her first name, sorry.
Caitlin.
Caitlin Harvey, yeah.
Yeah. But Beck did receive 70% of the vote. So, I mean, that says something. She's got a lot of the support of the NDP within the province. I mean, I'm just hoping that since the system isn't changing anytime soon, I'm hoping that Carla Beck can sort of make some progress for the NDP in Saskatchewan.
Yeah. I still stand by the same thing I've said since our very first episode, 50 episodes ago. The left is not going to win back this province by being bland. The NDP, as much as they think they can capture those right-wing voters by going to the center, I think sometimes, and this is getting a little bit more esoteric, and I fall prey to this sometimes too. I think sometimes those of us who are politically astute and politically involved, especially politicians, overestimate the level to which people pay attention to policies and platforms and ideas, and are aligned politically along a left-right spectrum. And I use the example that how many Bernie Sanders voters' second choice was Donald Trump, and how many Donald Trump voters' second choice was Bernie Sanders. They just knew they hated the center. They knew they hated the bland middle.
Yep.
And I think you have a lot of people who are far more invested in the exciting team than they are in any specific policy or platform or idea, and shift from left to right and whatnot. So it's not about trying to appeal to these more right-wing voters by trying to shift closer to the center. It's about appealing to voters who are drawn in by someone actually willing to stand for something, by actually being willing to stand for something. And I think that's going to be where the NDP have a chance at success, is actually being willing to stand for something. There's going to be a few different ways of doing that. I don't necessarily have the answer on which key thing to stand for is the important one, but I think you're going to need to get people's attention, get people invested emotionally, and that's what the NDP have not had the ability to do since Roy Romano. That's right. Romano was a centrist. Romano was like a hard centrist. But
he had charisma,
but he had charisma, and he stood for things, and he was excited. He was a passionate federalist, and he, wrapped himself in the Canadian flag,
Right.
for good and for ill.
Yeah.
And he got people excited about him, right? He didn't hide his Ukrainian roots, and like there were things about him that made him stand out.
Yeah.
And I've a bit of a broken record, but if you look at the variety of leaders that we've had,
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd be able to pull them out of a lineup as to which were which.
Right.
Back, at least I can visually tell apart from others. Smiley too. He was,
Yeah.
he had facial hair.
That's right. So that made it easier.
He's shorter, I think. But again, I want to see some excitement. I want to see them come out and actually stand for something. Heck, even if they're a passionate centrist and are vocally passionate about a policy that is a centrist policy, if they're passionate about it, that's fine. Just don't blandly drift towards the center because that's what you think are gonna maybe appease some of the people who will never vote for you in a million years.
I think that's the rub, right? Like the people that they're trying to convert often are people that won't ever vote for them anyway. So why not be dynamic and believe in something and be vocal about a thing that, maybe you can appeal to a lot of the non-voters in the province. But
and I get for someone who is one of the handful of seats that the NDP still has, there is a personal risk of them losing their seat, right?
Yeah.
Like if you go from 14 down to 9 or whatever seats you have, there's 5 people who lose their job. And for those 5 people and their families and their support staff and whatnot, there is a real tangible loss that occurs.
Yep.
But from a policy standpoint, from the ability to affect change within the province, dropping from 14 down to 9 really doesn't change a lot. It changes some committees and the ability to ask questions. Like it does have some impact, some funding issues, especially if you run the risk of losing official party status or something like that. But for the most part, if you come up to me and say, hey, they're at 14 seats right now, or whatever they're at, I don't even know the exact number. They're at 14 seats right now, and there's a 20% chance of them getting 50% plus 1 and an 80% chance of them dropping down to 9, I would say take that. That is 100% a good gamble, because it's like saying you have $10 now, there's a 20% chance of getting 100,000 and a 80% chance of dropping down to 9, right? Like it's at that point, the benefits of your win are so much more. It's worth the gamble.
It outweighs the risk. Yeah.
Right? Just that's each individual seat is not equal.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Anyways, I fingers crossed that we get to see something like that.
Yeah. Sask judge finds mask mandate not rights violation in convicting man. Provincial Court Judge Michelle Marquette found a mask mandate did not deprive the man of his constitutionally protected rights and freedoms.
I kind of want to say water is wet and the sky is blue. Like, governments have been allowed to implement health codes and charge people for health code violations for a very long time. That is not like
we've been saying this since the start of the past. It's like since we started the show, basically, right? Like
this is pretty basic stuff.
You don't have a right to put other people at risk. That's what it amounts to. Masks, vaccines, like that's one of the big ones that everybody's worried about, right? Is like my body, my choice, but you don't have a right to put other people at risk. And the law says that you have to have it, then you have to have it, even if you disagree or even if you find it frustrating. Yeah. And it's not.
Yeah. And the argument was that the mask, wearing a mask is a political statement rather than a health statement. So the defense in the case essentially had to prove that the wearing of a mask isn't about health guidelines, it was about politics.
Right.
Um,
Good luck.
and so, right, like that, because that would be illegal, right? Like if the provincial government came out and says everyone has to, in order to enter a public building, you need to wear an "I love the Sask Party" T-shirt,
Right.
or a button that says "I love the Sask Party." That would be illegal, right? That's a charter violation, because that is purely about forcing people into political messaging. So I get sort of the tack he was taking, because if he could essentially prove that the masks were on the balance more about the political statement that they express rather than actual health reasons, it would be a violation. And
That
this
that
is me
speaks
giving
to
him,
that speaks
the
to their fundamental
tiniest
misunderstanding.
bit. The tiniest bit of credit is he's not wrong that there were people, and still are people probably, for whom the wearing of the mask was as much a political statement as it was a health thing, right?
Right.
We know that the human tendency to be swept up in the crowd and to have a herd mentality exists across the political spectrum.
Yeah.
Right. The left is not immune to it.
No.
And I am sure there are people who only believed that COVID was real, not because they understood the science or believed the scientists, but because their political team was the team that believed COVID was real. I have enough. I am jaded enough about my own political allies to know that is true on my side as well as the other side. That's the little tiny bit of credit I will give. However, that's not why the mask mandate was there. Yeah. That is certainly why a small percentage of people who wore masks wore masks. Yeah. We've all seen the memes, or many of us have seen the memes that said, even after this is done, even after I was vaccinated, I wanted to keep wearing the mask because I didn't want people to think I was an asshole.
Yeah.
So there is still some of that, right? It was a political affiliation statement, just not in totality was that the primary aspect of it. So that was what the court case largely boiled down to.
Yeah, that wasn't what the government mandate was based on, right?
No.
So,
yeah. And I think especially in Saskatchewan, it's a hard case to try and prove that that's what the mandate was about, because you have a government who implemented it, who was very sympathetic to the anti-vax, anti-mask, hard right
for sure
side. So
I see you kind of brought it up in a different way, but with the being jaded about your own allies. But on my end, like, I know there were people who chose not to wear a mask as a political statement. Like they specific, like that was, but most of us who were wearing masks were doing it because it was a health thing. Like, so it was so they kind of have the political perspective of it backwards in a way.
Yeah, I think I think there was politics on both sides, and I think there was actually held beliefs on both sides as well. I think there were people who honestly don't think the masks helped. That was a genuinely held belief, that they honestly thought the masks were not beneficial. Like, I think they were wrong. I think they did their understanding of the disease did not catch up with the science when the science changed. Right. Because that's what science does. Because if, like, March of 2020, the generally held belief at the time, the scientific consensus in March of 2020 was you don't need to wear masks unless you are actively displaying symptoms. Yeah. Like, that was what health officials were saying 2.5 years ago, or 2.25 years, or whatever it was. Like,
whatever it is, yeah.
But then they gained understanding, right? Like, that's what science is supposed to do. And I think some people just didn't catch up. So I think there are true beliefs on both sides. And again, It's probably irrelevant of the people who wore masks, how many people wore masks because they honestly believed scientists, and how many
Right.
people wore masks because of peer pressure.
Yeah, no,
It
it really
probably
doesn't.
doesn't matter,
Yeah.
right? It's
Yeah.
like if someone's not smoking because they were, peer pressure flipped on smoking, so now smoking has a social stigma as opposed to a social cachet, or they actually understand the impacts to their lungs or da 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 da. Um, like at some point, humans are humans, and humans are swayed
Yeah.
by emotion far, far more than they're swayed by facts.
Yep.
Ideally, you want the emotion to align with the facts, but
My friend Damien often says, like, we're not logical creatures that are sometimes swayed by emotions. We're emotional creatures that sometimes use reason and logic.
yeah, often reason and logic to justify our emotions.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. So,
Yeah, we use our logic to try and find an excuse for why we're doing what we're doing, not actually motivate why
yeah.
we're doing what we're doing.
Yeah, because we're motivated already. So,
Yeah,
all right.
and it's layers on layers. So, anyways, well, we'll move
Yep,
on.
for
I was
sure.
going to get philosophical. Let's talk about buses instead of philosophy.
Regina is going to eliminate the city transit fees for those under the age of 13. And it was a unanimous vote on city council. I apologize to Saskatoon listeners and viewers. Like, this is what comes across my feed. I'm from Regina, so
I can summarize my reaction. I will not blow out your monitors or the microphone, but it was a very loud. I think this is incredible news. This is 100% a good thing. I
yeah,
am very, very excited by it. Um,
yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
it's good all around. It was originally going to come in as they were only free if they were accompanied by an adult. That got removed, so
Which is great.
it's
Yeah,
any kids. I like it directly benefits me. I am a direct winner of this, in that my kids take the city bus. They usually take the school bus, but the end of last year they were taking the city bus home from school. And this coming year, there's a very good chance. We still need to figure some stuff out, but there's a very good chance many days my kids will both take the city bus to and from school. Now my older son's now in high school, so it doesn't apply to him because he's 14.
right.
But that looks like that's going to hopefully change now as well too. So
Yeah, yeah, no, which is absolutely great.
yeah,
Yeah. Urged council, Florence Stratton, who was one of the people who spoke at council on Wednesday, urged them to expand the free fare to anyone 18 and under, which would be absolutely fantastic. Like that's that. I mean, I'm too late. my teenage kids, they don't live here, or they're actually past that. But it would have been like really fantastic if I hadn't had to spend $50 a month on, or whatever it was, on a bus fare.
and one of the things when it comes to public transit is I don't think people understand how cyclical the support is, both in downward spirals and upward spirals. I've been saying since I moved to Saskatchewan, I moved here in 1992 and was horrified and I was in high school at the time, horrified by the buses here. But no one takes the buses because they were expensive and they're not very good. Like the
Right.
routes are inconvenient a lot of times. There are places that are a half hour to 40-minute walk that are a 2.5 hour bus ride. There are places that are a 10-minute drive that are a 2 hour bus ride. People don't take the bus, which
Yeah.
means the buses don't have enough ridership, which means they don't have enough funding, which means they're not very good routes, which cause people to not take. Like
Yep.
you see the cycle. And we're not Toronto, we're not Ottawa.
Nope.
Like we're not a mega city that has subways, or in the case of Ottawa doesn't have a subway system. It's one of the largest cities not to have a subway system, so they don't have
Right.
a very good bus system. And I remember coming here as a teenager in Ottawa being spoiled, where it was, if I missed the bus, depending on the time of day, if it was during, like, before and after school, like if it was, this is the bus I'm taking to or from school, my wait time would be 2 minutes, 3 minutes, or 5 minutes till the next bus. Off of peak hours, 15 minutes or half an hour at the absolute most, depending on which bus I was taking. And then I come here and experience Regina Transit. I think if you get people taking the bus, if you get people understanding and used to it, it builds ridership. And the 17 and 18-year-old who took the bus for free now is in university, now can buy the university bus pass and are used to it, or looking at working downtown. And now that they're working, have to balance out, okay, I have a $150 parking, or I have a bus pass. Maybe the bus pass isn't so expensive now that I'm having to pay for it. And then you're building up your ridership. You're building the culture as well. Now it's a long-term thing. But like one of the, sorry, go on.
Well, I was just gonna say, and there's areas of the city that are very walkable once you're down there. Once you're like downtown, it's very walkable. In the south end, it's pretty walkable in some areas. Out east here, we're having it's not so walkable. But
it isn't, but you can use, like, again, we're not at the, Regina isn't at the point where it's economically feasible yet.
Yeah.
But you do have those mid-sized cities, so cities that are too small for subway, but large enough to have good public transit. You have things like Park and Ride, where you drive to a mall parking lot, you hop on the bus there, and it's a bus that basically just shuttles back and forth between your downtown core and a transit-owned parking lot, or a parking lot where you partner with a mall, right? And once you start getting stuff like that, once you start establishing that buses are actually efficient and useful, you remove some of the stigma as well, right? Because if you hear someone takes a bus to work in Regina, you automatically assume they're poor. Not that doesn't necessarily mean 100% of the time they are, but you would be surprised if you heard that someone making 90 grand a year working in a downtown office building took the bus to work.
Right.
Yep. That would be weird to you. Whereas it's not in other major cities, right? In those mid-sized cities, or in large cities too, when you have subway, you have people in Toronto who are making 200 grand a year taking the GO train.
Right.
That's not unusual. They're maybe not taking it at 11 o'clock at night, but they're taking it at 7 a.m. on the way to work and 5:30 on the way home.
Yeah.
And same with buses in other cities. So once you start removing that stigma, you get more ridership as well. And then you're getting some of those buses that come from the Wascana views, and I'm trying to think of some of the more affluent neighbors up in the Northwest. But like, you get some of these affluent neighborhoods that are outside the ring road, wherever they are in the city.
Yeah.
It's a 20-minute car ride into downtown. Hopping on the bus instead, reducing traffic, reducing pollution, freeing up parking space, revitalizing downtown. Just wins all around. I'm proselytizing about the larger picture rather than just
talk about it.
But this is, going back to the story itself, this is part of what leads to that, right?
Right.
Is if you make it so that bus becomes normal, then it's normal. And like, I do know someone who is in those higher income earning areas, makes 90 grand a year, takes the bus to work, because they came from a city where that's just normal, and they're in Regina, like, I'll take the bus to work. And that's not unusual, because they got used to it. And that's, I think, where with this thing with the youngsters, you hook them young, but you got to put on something positive, right?
Get them in the habit of riding the bus. Yep, for sure.
I went long because we so rarely have positive news stories.
No, that's fantastic. I love that.
I wanted to pontificate on something positive for once.
Yeah, we're gonna need to do more bus stuff, more public transit if we want to actually deal with climate change someday. So this is great. On to something a little less great. So, former Saskatchewan Premier Brad Wall texted advice to convoy organizer, according to a CTV report. I'm not sure what the sentence structure is here, but it says, had no contact with Sask convoy organizer, did not discuss with Wall, Sask Premier Scott Moe. So Scott Moe didn't have any contact with the convoy organizer and didn't discuss it with Wall. But
so
Brad Wall
did help, and Scott Moe did not talk with the organizer or Brad Wall. Yeah. Now, of course, if this comes out that he's lying, we will then be told we misunderstood the statement he's making in that he didn't actually mean that he had no contact with Brad Wall.
He just didn't necessarily discuss this with Brad Wall, right? Because of course they're
and by discuss this, he meant as political figures as opposed to just two people having a conversation.
Right,
we'll come up with reasons why this wasn't really a lie.
Absolutely.
I shouldn't assume he's lying, but
yeah. So Premier Scott Moe is facing questions after it was revealed that his predecessor had given advice to the Freedom Convoy organizers in February. Yeah, I'm not actually surprised that Brad Wall was talking to a convoy organizer. I wanted to go a little bit through some of these points that these advice that he gave, because I thought it was interesting. One of the points he said was that he was telling him that it is really important that any of those who are trying to hitch their wagon to this convoy with ulterior motives and off messages, especially racist stuff, be openly and roundly condemned by the organizers. This is advice that only some organizers followed and some did not.
To his credit, though, that's good advice.
That's very good advice. Good job,
I wish
Brad.
there had been more of that.
Yep.
Definitely wish there had been more of that.
Yeah, that's right. He was saying that the convoy was, quote, creating elbow room for provinces to move away from the mandates, end quote. Which I think is fair as a statement. Like, it gives them, it gives the Saskatchewan, it gives the Saskatchewan government the chance to say, hey, look, the mandates are unpopular. People don't like them. We can take them off.
Well, and it gives them the ability to say, hey, we're not like the crazy people. We're just...
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. We're reasonable.
We're not saying go up and lick people with COVID. We're saying you don't have to wear masks and we'll do absolutely nothing to prevent it.
Yeah,
right?
That's right.
You don't seem nearly as bad when you're comparing to those guys.
Yeah, for sure. So he was saying organizers should declare, quote, a victory of sorts, unquote, after provinces started to remove COVID-19 measures, which absolutely happened. And is a talking point after the fact of many people who were pro-convoy that they declared victory, and now you have to argue as a non-convoy person, you have to argue that, hey, that's not what caused this. So it's like pushing a boulder up the hill. And he was advising that the organizers donate some money to charity and suggested a headline for a potential press release. Which I'm not sure if they did or not. I know their money issues were all kind of wacky. I don't know if the money ended up going back to donors or what, but yeah. Like I say, it doesn't surprise me that Scott Moe was in favor of the convoy. It wouldn't surprise me to find out that Scott Moe was also in favor, but just didn't he did have a statement kind of talking in favor of the trucker rallies or the convoys. So
the issue is they want it both ways, right? Like that's ultimately one of the biggest problems is they are trying to thread that needle. Actually, it's not even that. I shouldn't even say thread the needle. It's a pretty broad passage to go through, because I say saying thread the needle, on one side appease the truckers and those who are the extreme, and on the other side sort of not come across as completely sort of unhinged. But you have a large portion of Sask Party voters who aren't in who do oppose some of the more extreme aspects, who are still just absolutely happy to turn a blind eye.
Yeah.
And it's sort of going back to what I talked about in our very first story about, like, you have a number of people who don't think that the vaccines were evil and bad and a conspiracy, and it's not some secret George Soros experiment to turn all of the frogs gay, or who don't think that public money should be going towards teaching children that being gay is just as bad as sexual assault.
Right.
They don't think that, but they're just still willing to vote for those who put forward policies in line with those things, because they can rationalize in their head that that's not actually what's happening. So Mo doesn't have to really thread the needle that narrowly, because he's given a lot of leeway. As long as he can at least have the semblance of, I'm not 100% in their pocket.
Yeah.
There's enough people in this province who are aligned with that team. Their team identity will trump sort of their misapprehension about some of those beliefs. And again, that sounds like I'm being negative, and I obviously to some degree
a little bit.
but again, that's human nature, and it's, again, tying everything together. It's why it's so important that the NDP be more than just the bland opposition, because if you can get people associating themselves with your team, the same thing will be true on the other side. Like, those same voters who are not in favor, like who are not in favor of teaching kids that homosexuality is evil, are also maybe not in favor of certain more left-wing economic policies that they would turn a blind eye to, or look the other way, or sort of grin and bear it if it was their team putting it forward, right? Yeah. Like, if they start associating themselves with the NDP, if they start to get excited, if they start to identify themselves with that brand, then when there is a social program that comes forward around, heck, not even economic, let's say a social program around free consumption sites or safe consumption sites, not even free consumption sites, but just safe consumption sites even. Yeah. Now all of a sudden they're like, I don't like safe consumption sites. They'll start justifying it to themselves. Oh, well, it's not actually a needle exchange. It's not actually like those places in Vancouver that I hate. It's not actually, and like, don't get me wrong, I like those places in Vancouver. I think those are good things. But if we can get them emotionally invested with the brand of NDP, being excited, being aligned with that political movement, they can grin and bear it, or they can rationalize and justify to themselves why this isn't as bad as this thing they don't like on the left, long enough that those policies can come into play, and that then becomes normalized. Because that's what happens on the right. They grin and they look the other way, they rationalize it long enough for those things to become normalized, and then they don't nearly hate them as much anymore, and that's when it gets really scary. So that was a long circle to draw all of that together, but
no,
I think they are linked, right?
Yeah,
and it's I think part of what leads us to the final story.
Yeah. Which brings us to our last story. Mo's government lead over NDP might not be as wide as latest polling suggests, according to experts. So in the latest polling by Angus Reid Institute, 57% of respondents say they intend to vote for Scott Moe and the Sask Party, and the NDP is at 34%, and then the rest falling into different percentages. 2% for the Liberals and 1% for the Green Party, and then 6% said they would vote for someone that wasn't named in the poll. But they also talk about how this isn't the end of the story, like as far as the poll goes and the way that voting might go if things can be done. So they talk about the number of factors at play between voting choice and issues of concern. One of the issues, so one issue is the fact that the poll was conducted between June 7th and 13th while the NDP leadership race was underway. So when people are looking at it and they see, well, they don't have a leader yet, I'm not going to say that I'm supporting them.
Yeah.
So
it makes sense. I still think the NDP have a pretty uphill battle.
yes,
but it does speak to the importance of having a leader with personality,
yeah,
and a leader standing for things, and being willing to publicly stand for things. I've made the comparison federally before too. The Liberal Party's policies under Trudeau were not that different than they were under Stéphane Dion, Michael Ignatieff.
Yeah.
Like Michael Ignatieff was more to the right than Trudeau campaigns, at least. But Stéphane Dion and Justin Trudeau are not that vastly different.
No.
Trudeau's shift to the left, again, especially as far as rhetoric, even if not policy, although even to some degree in policy, I think was largely a direction the Liberal Party was going to go either way. Like the Liberal Party has historically shifted left over time. They still do the campaign to the left, govern to the right, but they have definitely moved along with the social consciousness as that becomes more left within the country. What Trudeau did is he didn't hide it.
Right.
Like we talk about Trudeau's rhetoric being a lot more left-wing than previous leaders, but really he was stating Liberal Party platform items unapologetically.
Right.
Like a lot of that was already in the platform. A lot of it was already policy that any Liberal leader would come out and implement.
Yeah.
He just didn't give a shit about trying to appease those who wouldn't like it. And I think we need to hear Carla Beck do that. And I think if she does, you'll see that article come to fruition, that people care about the leader. Yeah. A leaderless party, and a party where people don't know what the party stands for, gets 34% of the vote.
Yeah.
As soon as you start standing for things and being willing to alienate a third of the province, and it sounds bad to say it that way, but it's true. If you start being willing to alienate a third of the province, you have a much greater chance of capturing the vote of the other 2/3.
Yeah, all of a sudden people are saying, oh, well, I mean, I wasn't really thinking about the NDP, but look at this thing that they're standing for, that they're believing in, that they're saying that I like. And
yeah.
And that's going to...
And the Conservatives do that, right?
That's right.
Like the Sask Party and the Conservatives have no problem pissing on people who are in that third of the province that will never vote Sask Party.
Oh yeah, they almost revel in it.
Oh yeah, they have so they have no problem doing things that are going to anger and upset and enrage voters who will never vote for them.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think from a high ideals, the future of politics in this country, I think that is bad if both parties sink to it. At the same time, that's also what both parties need to do to win if one party is doing it.
Yeah. So. Yeah, it is bad. It's, like you say, lowest common denominator politics in some ways, but it's also like, well, how do you compete on the level that they're competing on? You can't, like competes with like, I guess.
I think what you do is then you implement policies that aren't that, right? Like I think that's, if you want to have those high ideals, you are the bare knuckles fighter in campaigning, and then once you're in office, you don't actively harm your enemies. Like you recognize that those you are willing to piss off are still people you have to take care of.
Yeah.
And that you have to implement policies that nurture. And the left has typically done that.
Yeah.
We like, in some degrees, if you look at this province, many of the most left-wing policies benefit the most right-wing voters.
Yeah.
It's the fact that we have crown corporations benefits rural voters infinitely more than urban ones. I think it benefits urban voters as well. Don't get me wrong. If we were buying our electricity I think if there was a privately owned electricity provider, that would also still hurt people in Saskatchewan or in Saskatoon and Regina.
Yeah.
You and I would pay probably a little bit more for electricity than we are, and we would have less reliable service. Same with our gas and our other utilities.
Yeah.
We experienced that with Rogers recently.
Yeah.
Right? Like we would experience, but those who live in rural areas would be absolutely fucked.
Yeah, that's right.
Because someone living in Regina who has Rogers cell service lost it during that outage.
Yeah.
Someone in rural Saskatchewan who didn't have SaskTel cell service just wouldn't have cell service.
Right. Yeah.
Because Rogers and Telus just have no financial incentive to build a cell tower that serves 4 customers.
Yeah.
There's no financial incentive for that, right? So that is where the left sort of has the, say, moral high ground, but the moral impetus. Be willing to be assholes while campaigning, with the understanding that, once you're in office, even if it's someone who will never ever vote for you in a million years, they are still your constituents. They are still people you need to take care of. They are still people you need to give fair, honest government services to.
And that's the kind of the idea in a lot of left government stuff, right? Is like, we are for all our constituents, whether they voted for us or not, as opposed to leaving those people behind. But I think that's it for today. You can find us
at... well for time. Yeah. Look at us being efficient.
Yeah, we're awesome. You can find us at anchor.fm/frommanypeoples. Our Twitter is very slow the last few weeks, but it's at skpoliticspod. Facebook is facebook.com/frommanypeoplesstrengthpod. You can find the show notes at skepticalleftistpod.wordpress.com, or you can send us an email at frommanypeoples@gmail.com, and support the show at buymeacoffee.com/frommanypeoples. Well, thank you once again, David, for your time.
Thank you, Cory. I know you've been incredibly busy lately, so I'm glad that things have calmed down enough for you that you're able to do all of the behind the scenes work for these, because I know, like I said many a time, I put about an hour and 10 minutes worth of work into this, and yeah. You put many times more than that, so I appreciate that wholeheartedly. So
for sure.
Have a fantastic couple weeks, and see you in 2 weeks.
You too.